Hi, everyone. How are you doing this morning? Almost afternoon, I guess now. I'm Shannon Giordano. I'm the Director of Marketing for Fertility Planit, and I'm so happy to be able to welcome you to this session on practical solutions for challenging fertility situations. Thank you to Reproductive Fertility Center for sponsoring this session, and for Dr. Saadat and Paige, whom you'll meet very, very soon. Thanks also to our audience for joining us, both online and here in person. We welcome you to continue the conversation with us with our hashtag FPLA14. Thank you. For many of us, the path to becoming parents is pretty complicated. I know in my own situation, it took me 5 years, 4 IUIs, and 5 IVFs, and I wear them like a war wound, I think, at times. I now have twin boys that are 9 years old, so the path does end. You do become parents, and it's a wonderful situation. So with that, I really would like to turn it over and introduce to you the founder of Reproductive Fertility Center, Dr. Saadat, and have him say a few words about himself, and then to his friend and patient, Paige, and she will introduce herself as well. And then we'll have some time for a discussion, and at the end, we'll open it up for questions from the audience. So with that, I'll send it to you, Doctor.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Peyman Saadat. I'm the founder of the Reproductive Fertility Center. We currently work in different locations in Southern California. We have our main office in West Hollywood. I've been doing fertility treatments for patients since the year 2003. So I'll have Paige say a few words.
My name is Paige Johnston. I am 47. It took me 9 years, 4 miscarriages, and a lot of different treatments to finally get my 19-month-old right there. And through the process, I went through many doctors, and I finally found Dr. Saadat that brought me my little boy.
That's wonderful. And along the lines of difficult fertility situations, we've got some great questions. Dr. Saadat, can you tell us a little more about when is it time to consider using an egg donor?
All right, if you can, please also put up this slide. So egg donor is sort of the last resort, but for many patients, it may be the first line of treatment. When we examine the patient, when they first come to us, there's a few things we check as part of their workup. One of the first things we check is their egg reserve or ovarian reserve, and those are different kinds of tests that we do. One of them is an FSH blood level. The second one is an AMH blood level. By doing those tests, we can realize if their egg reserve is high, low, or very low. And in patients, for example, that received chemotherapy or had their ovaries removed, obviously they don't have any ovarian reserve, so their first line of treatment may be to use an egg donor. In addition, other people that may qualify for using an egg donor is some person that may have a chromosomal abnormality that may be difficult to become pregnant with their own egg. If they're menopausal, like people that are above age 50 and they don't have any more menstrual cycles, and other situations which we'll get to as the talk goes on.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. What has led to the great success rate in the egg donor program at your center?
So to be successful in an egg donor program, there's a few important things that we have to monitor. The first thing is when we choose an egg donor, I personally review their history, do their ultrasounds, and review their hormone levels, make sure that their egg reserve is very high and they're young and usually under 29 years of age. The other thing is we have to make sure that the uterus of the person that's receiving the egg, be it the mother or if it's a gestational surrogate, is being evaluated and there's no polyps or scar tissue or adhesion that may decrease the success rate of the implantation. In addition, in our clinic, all the monitoring is done by the physicians. So we make sure that everything and usually one physician and one nurse gets assigned to the patient. So we make sure that everything is monitored closely and there's nothing that's going to be missed, so that the success rate is high.
I'd love to hear more, too, about what some of the emotional aspects your patients undergoing egg donor cycles feel and share with you. And I'd love to hear more from you, Paige, as well, about how you felt, when you first came to Dr. Saadat, what the situation was, and how it led to your son.
Yeah. Well, with me, that I was getting pregnant, and I would reach the 8th, 10th week, and then the heart would stop. And I had been to, in this course of time, many doctors that, even before that would happen, they would look at my age, and then they would simply just say, oh, you just need an egg donor. And I really wanted my own child, and that's what spoke to me. And so I'm like, well, I'm getting pregnant. And it was when I met Dr. Saadat, and when he listened to me, of him asking me, have you had a genetic blood test? And it was the protocol that I liked, and it was all the testing that would be done right away. So prior to me even getting pregnant, though, and going through different doctors and their protocols, it takes time to go through all this testing. And because of my age, I was like, time's a-clicking, time's a-clicking. And so when we finally did my blood and I found out I had a missing gene, I realized, one, emotionally, I seriously was on the ground crying. So Dr. Saadat had called me, and it still upsets me. The emotions behind it is that you feel broken. And I think in anybody, not just my situation, but any loss, or even if you just want a child and why isn't it happening, and you spend your whole life of, you're going to get married and you're going to, or however your story is, but since I was a little girl, it was, this is how I saw my life was going to be. You never ever think, I can't have a child, or there's going to be all these complications. And on top of that, what it does to your marriage. So emotionally, it's grueling, and for me, I was really upset in my navigation to getting a child that nobody would talk about this, because a lot of people emotionally just shut down, and they don't want to talk because it's hard to talk about those feelings. So I started filming everything, and I am now editing a documentary and asking the hard questions of people. And of course, even days of going through my process, I would not want to film, and my husband would be like, "Hun, you seriously need to turn on the camera." And I was just so protective. But finding, and this is what makes Dr. Saadat amazing, is he listened to my being and who I was. And it was the little things, I don't even know if you remember. I had mentioned about myself how I do hospice. And I've watched many different people of different religions die and come back, and with the soul and the point and what my beliefs were. And when he came to me and said, he never even said, you have to do an egg donor. And it was handling me that way because it was my situation. He saw it was so hard for me to accept to have to do an egg donor. So at that point, it was him saying to me, but you even said that whatever soul is going to come to you will come to you the way it'll come to you. And it just kind of opened my brain emotionally to be like, oh my gosh, you're right. And then he said, and it's your blood. So I was in the beginning of not feeling so broken. And I think the staff along the way, Alinka, and I had my own nurse assigned to me. I had access to anyone, anytime. And literally holding my hand I could even run to the office and like, can you do my shot for me? But I did my own shots. So it was the emotions around it. It was a roller coaster, like life in general. But it was still just, even when I gave birth, it was Cole, that's my son's name, wanting to be with my husband more than me. And I'm like, is that because of the genetics? Is that, and then I'm like, great, I'm broken again. So I thought the emotions behind, around it would stop. And then, of course, it was parents telling me, oh, no, that just happens regardless. And in a few months, it'll be you. So, which is true. But I am so thankful that they actually, Linka and Dr. Saadat, worked with me. He tried my own eggs. So, and helping me in the process of finding an egg donor, which I don't know when you want to get into that, but they have their own egg donors. And that was a whole other emotional, down to me feeling, I just have to, can I touch upon this now?
Please, go ahead.
Okay, so looking at egg donors, it's like shopping. And the emotions around it, I think every time I sat in front of Alinka, who handles that part of it, I was always an emotional basket case. And then filming myself, I thought, okay, everyone that's going to see me, I'm just constantly crying. I really am a happy person. And I am a glass half full. But looking at the pictures and them, she was showing me the different egg donors. And you read the profiles. It was, I felt so guilty and terrible to be so picky because I thought this is so generous that they're doing this. And it was Alinka that helped me like, oh my gosh, don't even feel bad. I mean, this is like genetics for your kid the rest of your life. And if you want a picture of her hand, I can request that. Some people, and when I heard that, I was like, really? Someone wants a picture of their hand? But I thought, but that's how I was. I mean, that's why it was so hard for me to accept that I needed an egg donor, because I grew up looking, when you grow up and you look, I don't know if you guys have done this, but I would look at my dad's hands. I'm like, oh my God, he's got my nail beds. Or like my mom, like the mannerisms, and I was so attached to that. So it was a big thing to looking for the proper egg donor and reading the profile. And
I can imagine. And I'd love to hear more, too, from your perspective, Dr. Saadat, about, do your patients share this kind of information with you, and how do you then help them through the emotional aspects of what they're doing?
Definitely. So going through infertility itself, it's very challenging and emotional. A lot of patients share with me how they are losing their self-confidence, especially if they have prior failures, and how they think it's never going to happen. They're losing hope. They have no self-control because they're asked to come to the doctors every 2-3 days to do ultrasound. They miss their work, their family. So it's very emotional. And then when you have to choose an egg donor, the emotions are 10 times as much, because you feel like the baby may not be genetically related to me, so they feel like they've been, like Paige was saying, all their lives they've been hoping to have a genetically similar child to themselves, so now they have to give that up. That's very challenging and emotional. And then they worry about bonding with the baby when their baby is in their stomach. And then after the baby is born, should I tell the baby there was an egg donor? Should I not tell the baby there was an egg donor? So it's a lot of emotional challenges. And a lot of patients, like Paige was saying, need to try at least with their own eggs once or twice to see if they can get pregnant. Hopefully that will work. And then if not, then they can make a better decision to move to an egg donor. So I always tell my patients there is no emergency to use an egg donor, because egg donors you can always lose any time during the process. But it's important to try with your own egg at this time, because if you do not use your own eggs, you may regret it for the rest of your life.
And how do you figure out the words or the way to support someone in all the questions you just mentioned? Like, when do I tell my child? How do I tell my family? Do I need to tell my family? Do I keep this inside? How do you help guide that conversation with them?
Well, like Paige was mentioning, one of the most important things is when you do use an egg donor, the baby is still in your womb, and you have the connection through the umbilical cord for the 9 months that that you're carrying the baby. All the emotions that go through you will be transmitted to the baby. You know how we say, if you're pregnant, don't drink, don't smoke, try to listen to soothing music. So all of those gets transmitted to the baby, and when they did research, they found out that people that have babies through egg donors, the babies are more compatible with their mother than their egg donor, even though genetically they're not the same, but their behavior, their looks, and everything is more compatible with their mother than the egg donor. And also it's important, like Paige was saying, that we have a very good supporting staff. Ilinka and our other nurses have been in this line of work for many years, and they hold the patient's hand, and they tell them their experiences with different patients, and that sometimes help them guide through the process.
Yeah, I'd love to turn it back to you too, Paige, to tell us a little more about getting the news that there was this genetic component, and how that, how did you then decide to take the next step? What did you do, the conversations that you had, or how you made those decisions and moved through?
Mine was oh gosh, I guess I immediately just think how the next move. It's such an overwhelming process that you really do get pushed, or you fall to your knees and you have a come to Jesus moment. And it's more of, like, the people that are coming by the booths. When they're starting the process, some of you, I don't know if it's any of you, just the blank look. And during the process, I felt like that all along. So I always had this hope or this knowing that I would have a child. So when I got the news that it was me, and all along, seriously, I thought it was going to be my husband. I thought, I'm not broken, it's him. I'm perfect. And that's so not true. But it was more of, okay, so once I found out, I had to sit with those emotions. On the phone a lot with Ilinka, seeing a therapist. God, it brings it up because it's very painful. I didn't know I was going to do this.
It's okay.
I know a little tears, but not when I have to revisit it. Because I have no idea what my son is going to feel. And I see people, I have a sister who's adopted. She has so many emotions, and I don't know if he's going to be like that. So in the beginning, it's a day-to-day process. And I think it's more the staff that helped me through it. It was also, gosh, I think once I started going through the possibilities that this was really going to happen, and being a mom, and that was the through line, that was what I wanted. It helped me kind of regain myself emotionally and pull myself up and go, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Because adoption I didn't feel it. When I started looking through the egg donors and emotionally, and when I came across my egg donor, there is this knowing, like when you know you're doing the right thing in life and it just feels right. It's almost like a through line and spiritually how I felt it. And I had been looking at all these egg donors, but when I came across donor 196, that's like, it was reading her profile, granted seeing her, and I had a few egg donors, and I would show my husband or his friends, and they kept like, oh my God, she's beautiful, pick her. But it was more of her profile. So reading the profile, I felt as if I was reading, as if I wrote it. I was reading about me. And it wasn't even so much, and this is just for me because everybody's different, it was more on a spiritual aspect, the things she wrote about her family and the connection with that. other people, it's GPA, you know, and that wasn't for me. So that helped me emotionally. It helped me feel like, oh my gosh, this really can happen. It was also, you said something actually one time to me, you're like, and then I like imitating you, like, but your uterus doesn't age. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I could be 60 years old and carry, you know, not that I want to be that, but definitely it just helped the emotions and helped me feel, what's the word? Like my dream was going to come true. It was accepting that it wasn't going to happen the way it was going to happen. And finally, when I accepted, it was just the easiest process.
Dr. Saadat, do you give information to folks that are going through that situation on the ways they should think through that decision, or, you know, to make a list of the things that are the most important to you, or do you have guidelines around that, or does your staff help with picking the egg donor?
Yes, so we actually ask the patients to give us a list of things that are important, like the looks of for some people, like Paige was saying, the looks and the GPA, or the schooling is important. For others, it's emotional aspects and spiritual aspects. So we help them, we show them some of the donors that we have, and then if they don't like the donors, we help them find one that is to their liking. And to do that, we ask them a list of important things that are important for them, and then we try to match them with the correct donor. In addition, a lot of people, if they need additional help, we work closely with a psychologist who would talk to the person that wants to use an egg donor, to go over the emotional aspects of the process and discuss with them what they may experience throughout the whole process, and that sometimes makes it easier. It also helps that you have Eric, who's very supportive and nice and agreeable, so that's a big part.
And you know, picking the egg donor, I think that helped me with, when it came to choosing, it was, I asked my husband, like, do you want to be involved? Do you want to be there? And because I was so in my own emotions, and I mean, even what it does to the couple, where I would say, but you don't understand, you're the one that's not broken, and this tension, and he would turn around and just, it's totally up to you. I want it, this is, you have all the control in whatever you want. And that made me feel like, oh, okay, it lightened the load.
Excellent. So I know we're getting close to our question time, but I would love to ask one more question. Dr. Saadat, could you share with us a little more about some of the legal aspects of egg donation that go along with the medical, and what kinds of things that people need to think through?
Definitely. So when, in addition to the emotional aspects, there's physical aspect that I briefly touched upon. When we choose an egg donor, we want to make sure they make a large number of eggs, and that they do their medications on time, and they show up for their appointments and for the egg retrieval and all of that. So first of all, like I was saying, all egg donors we send to a psychologist to make sure they're doing it for the right reasons, and they're not just in it for the money. And they do a complete psychological profile to make sure that this is an appropriate egg donor. In addition, there is a bunch of tests that FDA requires, which we do on every donor to make sure they don't have any kind of diseases that can be transmitted to the child or the mother. In addition to that, there is drug testing that can be offered, and chromosomal and genetic testing. That's not currently required, but a lot of people request to do those tests to make sure that the donor is genetically sound and okay. Also important, equally as important, is for the donor and the intended parent to see an attorney to make sure that legal documents are drawn. because that will protect the intended parents from the donor later on, so there is no claim to the child, and vice versa, that protects the donor also. So we make sure that everybody has a legal contract, and that specifies that all the eggs that are donated will be for the intended parents, and the donor has no legal rights to those.
Excellent. So I think this might be a good time to turn it out for some questions. If anyone in the audience would like to ask a question of Paige or of Dr. Saadat, just one note to wait for the microphone so that we make sure we get you on tape. So I think we've got someone that's going to come around with the mic.
Sorry. Hi, Paige, this is for you. Firstly, he's really cute and well behaved.
Isn't he cute?
But looks like he could be a little naughty.
Yeah, he's good.
I know one of the things you discussed was about your bonding and feeling that he's yours,
Yes.
and your child. How do you feel from a male point of perspective? You know, do they feel any different towards the child as well? Maybe they don't feel as it's theirs as much, you know, in the same situation you went through.
Oh, like because I gave birth and maybe that, you know, that's actually, I never even thought about that. That is excellent because that is the same thing that I was feeling. And here's what's interesting. When my son was born, my husband talks about it was instant for him. Like he never had that. And I've heard that from fathers, that there's just not that bonding or that connection until later. I didn't have the connection. Here I wanted this for 9 years, and there was just, I don't know, I think I was sleep deprived and a little postpartum, but my husband, it was instant, and I think I got jealous of that.
Do you think it's like different because, you know, like from a male point of view, it's like, oh yeah, that's great, we've made that, we love it. From a woman, is that more that emotional connection to something?
Yes, and it was, and even though I gave birth and I wanted the emotional connection, I think because there's so much, I was so sleep deprived and the postpartum, it took me a while to have that. I was really looking for that emotional connection, and I get a lot of that like from talking, like, and he can't talk, right? Like, and so I actually the last few months, totally different. It's like when I'm away, I feel that emotional connection where it hurts, like if I'm away. And I never understood when a parent would say that, but now I get it. So with me, it was like reversed. Like I was the male and he was the female, as far as how that plays out.
Cool. Thank you.
There's a question up front here first, I think, and then we'll go back there.
Dr. Saadat, you mentioned that you quoted a study about a child is more likely connected with the mother rather than the donor. Can you tell me a little bit more about that study and where I could find more information or maybe read about it?
I don't know the author off the top of my head, but if you call my office, I'll be happy to send you the reference. But this is a study they did in the 1990s. The egg donor programs first became available in the 80s in the US. And then in the 90s, there was a lot of questions about the bonding and the emotions and all of that. So they did a study that showed that what exactly I said, that the babies that are born from egg donation look and behave more like their mothers than the egg donors. So I'll be happy to provide you the reference if you call my office.
Excellent. I think there was a question. There's a question back there. Yeah.
Hi. Mine was more of a comment on his question, just from the husband's point of view, because I'm in the same situation right now where I can't use my eggs, so we're deciding on next steps. And I know that I was really upset on the emotional part of not having, you know, my DNA or biological child. And I was kind of like, well, you still get that if we do an egg donor. And he was like, well, you don't understand that, you know, it did lose a little of my dream too, because you know, I had to, you know, have a dream of seeing my wife's DNA, and so it's still the same emotional loss, I think, where I was kind of taking that away from him, where I was like, oh, well, you still get that, so you don't see it from my point of view, when really he does, you know.
Did you feel that, Eric?
A little bit. Yeah,
Yeah, and my husband's right there. That's why I was just, you know, The way you just explained that, I definitely was like, you know, as far as combining the DNA of my DNA and his DNA and seeing what that was like. But yeah, there's definitely a loss in it, emotion, you know. But for me, it was more of like I wanted to see. I was so self-absorbed. It was really like I wanted to see my hands. But and I had this interesting thing that came up with that. I really prayed that and hoped it was a boy. I had this thing around it. It's gone now, but I had this thing that. But if I had a girl, I wanted her to look like me. I don't know why that is. It just is for me. And if I get a boy, okay, that makes sense. It looks like his dad. I don't even know the reason behind it. It's just an emotion. And I will say this: if you do the egg donor and you go down that road, it goes away. At least for me, you know, in my filming process and interviewing people and talking to other people in chat rooms and all that, it really does go away. And then there's support groups for just people like if you do it like for us. And the consensus is it goes away.
In my experience, I've heard, I can validate what you just said, because a lot of times when we recommend an egg donor to a client, a lot of time is the husband that's taken back and says, no, I don't want to do this, and they take it as a grieving point and a big loss. So I have heard that many, many times before, like you said. So it's a very common emotion that you're experiencing.
Any other questions out there?
Hi, how long is the process on average from when you make that decision to get an egg donor, and then approximately cost-wise, like what does it cost on average?
Right, so the most important part of the process is choosing an egg donor. And an egg donor you can choose in one day, and it may take you 2 years to choose an egg donor. Once you choose the egg donor, though, the process will take anywhere between 45 to 60 days. And then that's because we have to match the periods together and then start the egg donor on medications to make egg, and the mother on estrogen to make the uterus ready to receive the embryos. And that will take, depending on when the donor starts her period and when the mother starts their period, that will take 45 to 60 days. The approximate cost varies based on the donor that you choose. It could be anywhere between $25,000 to $40,000, $50,000. Some donors charge $3,000, $4,000, and some donors may charge $15,000 or $20,000, depending on who you choose.
Can I just also tell you, like my personal process, I think it was ours took about a year because it was more the finances. And that's what, like, gosh, you know, in this process of, we went through hundreds of thousands and gave up everything. Until, of course, I think if I found Dr. Saadat in the beginning, we would have been fine and in our house and all that. But, and we, financially, what was amazing was going, it was the only clinic that I found when that was always a question of, well, we don't have the money. We don't have people to give us money. It comes from us. And Alinka explained the ways of financially getting help and having to get some of the meds for free, and that, you know, if you qualify, and that was a relief. We also did a fundraiser that our friends kind of pulled together, and that was a miracle in itself, how that even happened. And personally, because I tried my own eggs too, and and that was my husband saying, I don't care, we can, you know, so if it's another 10 grand or whatever, you know. I think ours came out to be roughly 30. It might not even be that. It's been a while, but that's just, I've had some procedures along the way. But I know it was a lot less for me just if I just did the cost for the egg donor and all that. So it's not, it doesn't always have to be a huge amount.
Anyone? Yes.
So you're talking about getting the donor in the office and doing all of that before you do the transfer. So you don't get the eggs from a bank like you would sperm?
Well, that's another option. Some people use egg donors from a bank. There's downsides and upsides to that. The downside is the number of eggs you get is limited, and then the number of embryos, therefore, are limited. So in the future, if you want to have a genetically similar child to your first child, then it may be, you may be unable to do that because there's only limited number of eggs. The other thing is when you choose eggs from an egg bank, there is transportation of the eggs involved, and things can happen during the transportation. So, for example, that the eggs may defrost in the way, and then they won't be any good. But having said that, that's an option also. We usually recommend doing a fresh cycle with the donor and the parent being simultaneously stimulated, and then as soon as we get the eggs and make the embryos transfer to the uterus, because fresh always has a better success rate.
And I actually did look, I also went through an agency. Mine, I was so, I mean, thank God I found someone I connected with that they have their own egg donors. It also, what was great doing everything at Reproductive was if I went to an agency, there's an agency fee. And when you're penny pinching, $7,000 is a lot for an agency fee. So I think it's almost a cycle.
Any other questions out there that we could answer? All right, great. I have a few that I can throw out there. Dr. Saadat, can you share some clinical situations in which egg donors are used? Are there more than what we've discussed here today?
Surely. So other situations where an egg donor may be used is patients that have had low egg quality, but they're still getting pregnant, so their ovarian reserve is low. And then when they get pregnant, the baby ends up having Down syndrome or any other number of genetic problems. They have a couple of options at that stage. One option would be to do in vitro with pre-implantation genetic testing to see if the embryos are healthy, and then put the healthy embryos in. And then but the problem is when the egg reserves are low, the number of embryos that you get are very low. So when you do pre-implantation genetic testing, a lot of time you end up not having any embryos to transfer. So in that situation, another option could be an egg donor, for example.
Yes. Great. Just wait for the microphone. It's coming. It's coming right up.
You were talking about fees and how much it costs for donations and things like that. Is there any particular insurance company that works better with these kinds of procedures? And I believe Massachusetts is a little more progressive in covering infertility. Is there any news on what could be happening for the state of California in that realm?
Not yet that I know of. There is a, the woman we met coming in.
Yeah, there's an exhibitor, Davina Funkhauser from Fertility Within Reach. She has a booth upstairs, actually. She lives in Massachusetts, as do I, which is why I was able to do 5 IVFs. And she lobbies the government and has a policy manual. So if you haven't stopped by her booth, great person to visit.
And when I met her, so because I filmed a documentary, I do touch upon the situations with insurance and pharmaceutical and all that. I'm not going to bring it up. It's too controversial. You can talk to me personally. But so going through her, I will now learn to do the process of helping with that.
And then when you do an egg donor or IVF, there's a lot of other testings and pre-preparation. For example, some people may do what's becoming popular now called endometrial scratching, where we scratch the lining of the uterus to improve the implantation rate, or doing a hysteroscopy if you have polyps or fibroids. And a lot of insurances, we are in network in our clinic, and we found out that a lot of insurances do cover those preparatory work. And IVF, I would say, is being covered more and more now. When I first started, there was like only maybe 5% of insurances that covered the infertility treatment. Now I would say it's about like 15 to 20% of the PPOs that do cover. But usually not for donor. We've had a couple, but
we get, don't we, Link, I think I purchased insurance for my egg donor. So so that helped when you weigh out the cost that way, and it wasn't even that much.
But that's a short-lived insurance policy that really covers only the donor, and it only covers complications that might arise from the stimulation cycle. What is that insurance called? Could we have you on the microphone, because then we'll have it on the tape, please? Thank you.
So this is called oocyte insurance, and oocyte as in egg insurance. And there is a specific company that we work with, and I'll be happy to provide that information to you. If you call my office or call me personally, I'll be glad to give you that company. But it really doesn't cover the cycle. It only covers the egg donor for any complications that might arise from the cycle, such as hyperstimulation,
yeah, which is what
stimulation.
we went through.
Yeah.
And that helped.
So that always helps, because, God forbid something happens and, she ends up being hyperstimulated, which is one of the, risks. Then you, as a parent, you've already incurred quite a bit of cost. You won't have to, continue, forking out money.
And I will say different clinics, because I've been to so many, it seems they all had their different procedure, how they went through it. For some reason, everywhere else that I went, and I went to all top ones, supposedly, right? Everything was out of pocket for me. When I went to reproductive, it was amazing, and you probably know this side of it because this is the one, but they ran anything and everything they could to help me with that. And I was helped a lot financially.
Because, I have a personal vendetta against insurance companies, and I'm not going to go there because it could be very controversial. But, and I have been a fertility patient for 5 years, and I spent $250,000 to have a child. So I feel that if I can bill something to insurance in a perfectly legal way, why the heck not? So anything that can be billed to insurance will be billed to insurance.
That's great. Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
I think we have one more question, and then we'll have to finish up.
Hi. It's a little bit off the subject of financial, but so I guess I wanted to know, eventually, one day, are you going to tell your son as far as the egg donor?
I have a documentary, so I think I'm going to have to.
Right.
Well, and I have been on some talk shows, and it was after doing stuff like that, I was like, I even thought, am I going to tell him? But I guess now it's, spiritually, I really believe, it's just my experience, that we choose our families. If I choose, then you can't really blame, and you're never a victim, because then you chose to have this experience. So I believe his soul chose me. Mm-hmm. I am outspoken. I do want to talk about things, and I do want to speak truth, and that's my being, is being truthful. And I do now see there's nothing shameful about it. and he's loved.
Mm-hmm.
How I'm going to do that, I have no clue. I literally, as soon as that, like thinking that right now, I'm back to that same feeling of that process of going through how I'm going to have my baby. And it's more of, I just trust. So when it comes to, like, I don't even know when I'm going to, I don't know. Do I do it when he first starts to learn to talk? How do I go about it? I think about what my dad did for my sister. Like, she was always just this special, you know, she knew from, I don't even know how early she could
Oh, that's another question, too. Do you have other eggs now to use?
I have 5 frozen embryos.
Okay.
And we will do another one. Today we've decided, tomorrow I may change, but for today I've decided I better do this. I don't, you know, just get it done at the, you know, the exhaustion years, but I will.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, one more quick one. I think we can, it would be great to fit it in.
Just as a follow-up to that question, did it work for you on your fresh transfer? And is that why you have 5? Or like, what was sort of your range of numbers, if you're willing to share?
No.
In terms of
I'm an
also,
open book.
you know, eggs, embryos, and then ultimately...
we got, I can't remember the exact number.
I was just actually
About
looking at
28?
it. It's about that much, yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing. We got
A
28.
lot of eggs, right? And then on the fresh cycle, it didn't work because there was a timing problem. So we had to freeze the embryos, and then I think you got pregnant on the first frozen embryo.
Yeah, the first frozen I got. The first time I didn't, but the second time, the first frozen, that was...
That did it.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you so much. You can learn more on fertilityplanet.com. We'd like to thank Fora TV for live streaming and recording our programs. Thank you definitely to Dr. Peyman Saadat and Paige. Thank you so much for being here today, sharing your experiences with all of us.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for Reproductive Fertility Center for sponsoring this session as well. Please definitely feel free to talk to us at the end if you'd have any more questions. And visit the booth. There's a booth up in the exhibit hall. Thank you.